Okay, I'm gonna gab a little bit about David Gemmell's fantasy novel Legend, and this is gonna be the first in a series of reviews I want to do uh, on each of the novels within the series, and they're not subsequently following each other in a normal sense. They take place at different points on a 1100 to 1200 year timeline. So basically, how this works. And without further ado, let me get down into the book. The basic plot behind this book is that there's a fortress called Drust-Delnoch, which is built at a pass going into Draenei lands, and you have an army of invaders that call themselves the Nadir. Basically, picture a bunch of Mongoloids like Genghis Khan and his followers, but they call themselves the Nadir, and they're kind of like a cross between Mongoloids and Native American Indians, and they are a vicious batch of enemies that have always, for centuries, fought against each other because they're divided up into different tribes. And this guy called Ulrich Khan came along, united them, and has now set out to conquer the world, and he set his sights on Drust-Delnoch. Now, he's got about 500,000 men in his army ready to take down Drust-Delnoch, which is a six-walled fortress in a pass, kind of like picture 300, but with a huge version of the Alamo, and you know it's going to fall, but this is what happens before it falls. The Draenei men number only about 10,000 inside this fortress, and their General Abelin is trying to buy themselves some time by assembling an army in there to train in the next 3 months, while 10,000 men somehow hold off this 500,000 man army. What also is needed to motivate these guys is an old axe fighter by the name of Druss, who is nicknamed Druss the Legend. He's been through some shit in his life, and he carries a large double-bladed butterfly axe called Snaga. Druss is about in his 60s, and he's either reached a choice since his wife died and he's living alone. He can either go ahead and fight with his fellow countrymen or just drift off into senility just before his death, and he decides he'd rather go out with his boots on. So he mans up and heads off to the fortress to kind of be an inspiration to these guys. His axe, at this point right now, it used to have magical powers, but they tell about that more in prologues. Here it's just a symbol of inspiration for the men around him when they see him fighting, and it's just really cool. We're also introduced in the story to a character by the name of Regnak, who becomes the Earl of Bronze. Basically, the Earl of Bronze, there's a set of armor that's made of bronze, and it has no magical properties in itself, except in the way that it's protected, but whoever wears it, kind of like Druss with his axe, is also an inspiration to the men around him. The character of Redneck, basically he falls in love with a woman named, I want to say, Valeria, and it kind of plays on Conan the Barbarian. He falls in love with a woman named Valeria, and she helps him to overcome a darker side of him because he's a craven and a coward. But when it comes down to fighting, there is a point in the battle where he just lets himself go berserk. They call him Bearsark, but it means berserk, and basically what that means is that he'll just go and start hacking and slashing everybody about him in a major battle, and it doesn't matter who it is. He will cut down friend and foe alike. And she helps him to overcome that aspect of himself over time because he's afraid of getting involved with anybody. We're also introduced to a group of priests who call themselves the 30. Now, what the 30 basically are a group of priests that can actually astrally project themselves in battle. They can cast spells and fight like regular men, and they fight against these guys that are kind of like the Draenei's Saga's version of the Dark Templars, and they basically just have a huge battle on the astral plane, kind of like an angels and demons thing, which is really cool. The story itself, even though it does focus on character development, it skims over them kind of quick. This is the style of Gemmell's writing in this is basically that it's think of it kind of like from a militaristic mindset. you take into account absolutely what you need to know. Gemmell kind of plays off this point of view with everybody. There's no time to put out description, and you get some character development and some things, and they do cover some moments of the human aspect, but for the most part, this is a strictly short and to the point narrative kind of style within the story. The only book in the Gemmell saga which has a more expanded character development and description is Hero in the Shadows, which is the third Waylander book, and I'll cover that later. But for the most part, it's just basically a quick style. What more I can say about this book? It's just great. Go and read it. The ending is not quite what you think. There are folks that do die in this. When I said a little bit ago that this was a medieval version of the Alamo, there will be quite a lot of death in this, but there's also aspects of magic, which I forgot to touch on real quick. I described this kind of like the Song of Ice and Fire, as where there is magic in this, but it's not really a huge part of it. There are a couple of scenes, but that's about it. At least in this book. There will be other books that do cover aspects of magic. But for the most part, yeah, it's a pretty good book. If you're needing something to read, I highly recommend that you go and check this out. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back later.